This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Take Two with Betsy Broadman and her guest.
Oh, are we okay? There's music, but anyway.
Hey, Betsy.
Hey, Will. There was supposed to be your intro that you did, but that's okay. We can just play your music now. It's good to see you, and I'm so glad you're coming. I mean, this has been 40 something years, and finally we're doing this. So I'm really grateful. I'm really glad we're doing it.
Delightful to be here.
Again. So let's see. Let's start by me introducing you, since a lot of people know who you are, but can we start chronologically? So when you got to Cambridge, you met Bonnie, but I think Dick Waterman watched you in, I don't know which club it was, but he said to Bonnie, you got to come hear this guy. He's really good. You might want to watch him. Is that right?
As I understand it, well, Dick was showing up at some of the clubs I was playing, and I had moved up there with guys from high school and guys I'd been in bands with for years. And we eventually just sort of came unglued a little bit, and I was playing with some other bands. And Dick was showing up at all these clubs. I really appreciate Dick.
It's great.
Can't say enough and owe him a great debt of gratitude. He was an odd duck. I loved him. He'd show up like in a Clint Eastwood cowboy hat with a leather vest on. He had a Fu Manchu.
Very cool. Yeah.
Be smoking like a Clint Eastwood kind of a rum-soaked Brazilian cigar, you know. And he almost never talked to me. He would come in after the band started, and he'd leave before the first set was over. And he did it many times. And apparently, Bonnie, who had just been traveling with Freebo most of the time, just as a duo, but she'd open for, you know, Orleans or Little Feat or Butterfield or something like that. And maybe for the last couple of songs, some of those guys had come out and, you know, finish the set with her and give her a little rave up. But Dick and all of them felt that she needed her own band for the Late for the Sky tour. And Dick said, apparently,
For Jackson's tour. Is that right?
For Jackson Browne's Late for the Sky tour, yes. And so Dick basically said, I've been watching this guy. I think he'd be a good fit. So I'm sitting there playing Jax. It was Jax the night. I know you know that.
I was
And
there.
it was Jax the night that I actually met Bonnie. And I was playing it. It was the last song of the set. It was an Al Green song, and we finished. And she just jumped up and said, introduce me.
Woo!
And so we talked a lot and all this stuff. And I told her I'd seen her once before and really enjoyed meeting her and whatever. And a couple of weeks later, her manager called me and said, would you be prepared to do 50 cities? And I was like, well, yeah.
50 cities? I didn't know that.
The Late for the Sky tour was 50 cities.
No, I didn't know you did all of that. That's amazing.
I did all of them. Just started right off and did it. And it was great fun. Well, you know,
what can I ask?
mean, I was a little.
Can I ask you what you did? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you do to prepare for that? The Late for the Sky tour.
Well, Dick's office sent me her first records, and I just glued myself to them. I just learned them. You know, I didn't know it. I don't think I was as good as any of the players on it. I was just 22 years old, but I listened to it and I really learned the tunes. And so the first rehearsal was really easy. Actually, when I got to the first soundstage, I think everybody was a little reticent because they're thinking, she can have anybody in LA and she invites this kid out of her.
Oh, come on. That's funny.
But so they were nobody was very effusive right off the bat because they thought I'd probably be getting my, you know, leaving papers here soon. But the first rehearsal went so well. It was like, we'd run through a song. Well, do you know Under the Fallen Sky? And I was like, well, sure. Do you know Stay Too Long at the Fair or whatever? And so she went, well, that was easy, you know, and I was in. And so we did the whole tour, and then she kept me around for another 5 years.
Oh my gosh. I remember that night at Jack's actually, and I remember that you were on the tour because I was on the tour with one of the PR people from Asylum. Yeah, for part of it. And I remember you very, very well because you stood out. But we talked a lot about, actually then and lately, we talked a lot about the difference between the way you were playing then, because I watched some of your old tapes, Bonnie's group, and some of how you played when you got to Muscle Shoals, and the efficiency of how you played and the difference in the sound. In other words, I think we talked about the fact that you played leaving out some space, which spoke.
Well, yeah, you know, the song is in the holes. If you fill all the holes up, it's an arrangement. Where's the song? And you have to leave space. And I always came from there, but I still listen back to some of my early stuff with Bonnie live. And I think I was, you know, excited and trying to stick in some things I was learning at the time. And sometimes I wish I had played with more restraint. You know, the older we get, you know, you just learn what not to do. And I think, you know, that's what I get hired for. I get hired for what I leave out now, you know.
Now, yeah, Muscle Shoals.
Oh yeah, it's our mantra down here, less is more, you know. And so, and I've been here 42 years, so I know. I moved here in 1980.
Oh my God, you're right.
So,
that's crazy.
Crazy.
No,
so,
that's wonderful.
So yeah, but you know, and I think back, and when I, you know, I just saw Bonnie last night, you know,
At the Ryman.
Delightful. At the Ryman, and she was so great. They set John and Andrea, you know, John Hall next to me and Jude Johnstone as well. But John and I reconnected wonderfully, and Janet enjoyed meeting Andrea. And we, you know, just the idea that, I mean, John was such a, he was the shoes I had to fill, you know, with Bonnie.
Oh yeah.
He was the standard. He'd taken the solo and stayed too long, and the fair, and you've been in love too long, and all that early stuff. And so just seeing him and being able to say, it's so delightful to run into you, John. And I think it was a great little contact there last night. And Bonnie was so excellent. There wasn't a wasted note. She sang beautifully. She blew us all away. It watered my eyes at least twice.
Oh,
and so I just had a great night last night. And it reminded me of how excellent and wonderful it was to cut my teeth with Bonnie.
How lucky were you? I mean,
it's like catching lightning in a bottle.
Wow, that's a good way to put it. What was your favorite, or not your favorite song, but did she play any of the old ones last night that you guys used to play, or not really?
Well, actually last night, the one that I played the most with her, because she had just done the Streetlights record when I joined her band. So I probably played Angel with her, I don't know how many times, hundreds, I'm sure. And she almost doesn't do it anymore since John passed, you know. Yeah. But she did it last night, and I could barely breathe through it. She sang it just so, she waited and took her time and was wonderfully emotive and dramatic, and it was not, all of it was real. And I mean, my eyes are watering now telling you the story. I mean,
oh, really?
When she did Angel last night, I could barely breathe, truly.
What's that line that I remember that John wrote? That's, how can anyone get up in the morning, go to work someday, and come home at night and have nothing to say?
And to realize that a man wrote that song. You know, it's written from the perspective of a woman. You know, there are flies in the kitchen. I can hear them buzzing. I ain't done nothing since I woke up today. How the hell can a person go to work in the morning, come home every evening, and have nothing to say? And it's just poignant. And you realize how many people are living quiet lives of desperation. And John captured it in one verse. It
what was a beautiful nugget. I mean, he was such a poignant.
He's a genius.
Yep.
He's a lyrical genius. Yes.
Yeah. I'm glad you went last night, and I'm glad you saw Andrea and John and Jude, of course.
Oh, they were great.
Good.
It's wonderful to see John.
They're an adorable couple. I'm really happy for
yes, them. They are. And so happy. And it's just been a month and a half. You know?
I know. So when you were with Bonnie, what were some of the highlights that you can remember?
Oh my goodness.
I'm sure there were a million, but I'm just
well,
saying.
you know,
personal highlights?
You know, doing all the no nuke stuff at Madison Square Gardens, Battery Park. There's 500,000 people there, and you know, I mean, Carnegie Hall, Philharmonic. Just we played Hawaii. I mean, we played Montreux. She took me around the world, and we made music. You know, and it was just a delightful 5 years.
You two seem to be quite meshed at a certain point. I remember the way that she would look at you on stage, kind of.
Really, I appreciated that. Even in her Rolling Stone interview at one point, she said, if I get stuck or on a chord or whatever, I just ask my guitar player, Will. And we had a really good communication. We really did. Some ways we're contemporaries. You know, we're only 2.5 years apart in age. And you know, Freba was 8 years older and Dennis was 10 years older. And in a way, we were more, you know, the same generation, so to speak, you know, and maybe she just enjoyed the new guy in the band and a new perspective. And, you know, she knew the other guys longer. And I always appreciated, you know, the fact that she respected my opinion.
That's huge. I think not only that, but it also seemed as if she valued your friendship a lot.
Well, I love her. And we were really friends. You know, when you, in any concerted effort, and, you know, you can say a Broadway play or war or whatever, rock and roll.
Or a football team.
Our football team, when you have common goal and common focus, it becomes a family. You're just drawn together. You become, it's way more, you know, you're only on stage 2 hours a day. I mean, you can't be on the road with somebody that you can't hang with.
Exactly.
You know, and so, you know, we were a wonderful hang. We laughed. I bet you there was a lot of laughter on that bus.
So I know what the Late for the Sky tour was like on the bus. What were your typical tours like on her bus?
Well, you know, we toured with really interesting people like Tom Waits. We were out on the road with Waits for a long time.
Right.
And he and I were like the late night guys. So we got close. We got tattooed together, for heaven's sake.
No, what did you get? Can you show me?
Barely. I might be able to pull a shirt up. I had gotten busted as a young boy. And I ended up in a county jail where they were doing jail tattoos that day. And I know better than this, but I got a peace sign on my arm. And it was a pretty ugly peace sign. It was sort of oblong and broken in the middle. And I had it on my arm for years. And I just covered it up with the yellow rose of Texas. And Waits, we ran into this guy in Buffalo. And this guy had some really nice ink. And so Waits goes, where'd you get that? And he said, right down here. And he said, I want to do something. I said, I'm going with you. I'm going to cover up this peace sign, get the yellow rose of Texas. He said, I'm going to put Nighthawk on my arm. And so Waits,
perfect.
He had just released Nighthawks at the diner.
I know.
Talk about diamonds on my windshield. Tears from heaven. Right now be rolling into town on interstate. Talk about a steel train in the rain. As the wind bites my cheek to the wing, as these late nights, this freeway flying always makes me sing. Yeah. Anyway, Waits and I were on the road and got tattooed together.
How lucky.
It's one of my rock and roll stories.
Pretty good one. You want to play like a little bit of riff for us? Do you mind? I know I'm catching you off guard.
I don't know, you know. Just sitting here without a pick.
It's okay. I told you I could listen to you all day. I love your stuff. Wow. Nice. So I think I mentioned to you that I was obsessed. I actually was. I got into these True Tone. There was more than one. It was a whole series. It was called True Tone.
Yeah, True Tone Lounge.
That's it. And yours were amazing. I watched all of them. And some of them were very entertaining, but some of them are very educational, or both. Can you tell me a little bit about how you did those and why you did them?
Well, he was asking, of course, that's a guitar oriented kind of an interview where he wants to know, how do you think, how do you approach things? It's you know, in some ways almost want a guitar lesson. For example, he might ask me something like this. If I went like this, got a little looper down here, and he might say, okay, divide the chord up. And I very rarely play more than 2 notes at a time. And if I want this to be more R&B, I might go,
Nice.
you know.
Yeah.
But if I wanted it a little bit more Memphis, I might go. Something like that. If I wanted it more country, I might go in thirds, like. And I might even go like this. You know, I might just, whatever, I'm just screwing around right now.
No,
And I'll just show them how to divide a chord up into 2 notes and make it feel or talk differently or
right.
stuff like that.
And you don't have to be, my point was, I'm not a guitar player, and I found it fascinating. I love that. I mean, I thought it just was so tasty. Really.
Well, that's great. You know, Bobby Bland, I did a couple of records, maybe more than that, for Bobby Bland.
Blue Band.
And he'd go, give me some love licks. You know, he had a real beautiful voice. He'd go, give me love licks, and the song might be going like that. And I'd go, you know, like that. You know, stuff like that. You know, just really move. He loved that one, you know. And
yeah.
So I did a lot of love licks for Bobby Bland, and you know, you listen to the old Cornell Dupree. I moved into New York City in '75 to sit at Cornell's feet, and literally was there every day I was in town in New York. I sat. That was when Cornell and Steve Gadd and Richard T. and Gordon Edwards were just a 4-piece band at McKell's, and I just sat at their feet, you know, and got to know them a little, and robbed Cornell blind, you know, as I've robbed Reggie and Bobby Womack and all the other greats that I love, that I adore their rhythm playing, you know.
Wow. You're so fortunate. Did you ever get to meet anybody that totally blew you away that you never thought you'd meet?
Well, you know, traveling with Bonnie was rare air. She's so well respected, and people love her from every different kind of genre, you know, like the night before we played the Hammersmith Odeon, a lot of folks threw her a party in England, and the cream of English blue, you know, the Mayall, Alexis Kerner, the Stones, Elton John, people like that I would end up meeting. But then back in the States, you know, James Taylor and Carly Simon wanted to sit in with us one night, you know, that kind of thing. And,
oh man.
And just the, you know, the interesting people. We met athletes that loved her, you know, and just, you know, I mean, actually, one of the most delightful people was her dad. You know, I loved Broadway when I was a kid. Yeah, when I was a kid, I loved Broadway, loved My Fair Lady, that kind of stuff. And if I remember, my dad once took me to see Pajama Game. And so the movie had, you know, Bonnie's dad in it, but he did Oklahoma and My Boy Bill, Carousel. Yeah. And meeting Big John and going out to a Mexican restaurant with him was just awesome. You know, that kind of.
He was lovely. The thing that I was talking to her, but she didn't know this. She had the same teachers as I did. We went to the same elementary school, but she was 4 years older than me. But no, but she lived only 3 blocks from me. So
awesome.
Yeah, I realized I knew her name. I knew she was cute. I knew she was smart. I knew she was kind of, what's the word? Feisty as a little girl, but I didn't realize that that was the same person as she got older. But I realized obviously about her parents, you know, her dad. Yeah. So when did you start playing guitar? I mean, really playing guitar?
Well, really, I
ask you for a
love
reason. Can I just, sorry, I hate to interrupt.
sure.
I ask you for a reason because some people kind of picked it up once, you know, they were, I don't know, 9 or 10. Some people picked it up in high school. How old were you when you really started to take it seriously? I don't mean like in a serious band. I mean like devote yourself to it, like you knew and here you wanted to do it. Yeah.
Well, you know, before, it's funny, there is a picture of me in like a cowboy suit when I was 4 or 5, you know, with a little cowboy guitar, which I wish I still had. But really, I've been taking piano lessons. My stepmother was teaching me piano, but I never related to it. It's like I would hear it, my ear was good enough so that if I heard it, I sort of worked it out. I never really learned to read well, but it was never an instrument I jokingly say you can get upset on a piano, but you can cry on a guitar, you know.
Whoa.
But so, I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan.
Yep.
February 9th, 1964. It was cataclysmic. I think within a month there were 4 bands in my junior high, and I was in one of them. And I really just took to it. I came home from school every day. I begged a guitar out of my grandma, and she bought me a really cheap little, Japanese import. And I ended up just, every day after school, learning anything I could, and at the time it was the British invasion. This was 1964. Right. So I played my first dance in 1964.
Where was it? Tell me about
They paid us $20. I got $5. Probably ruined my life. I went, you'll pay me to do this?
Wow. Oh, what a way to go. Where was it?
It was in Orange Park, Florida.
Uh-huh.
My dad's a naval fighter pilot, so we lived where the aircraft carriers were, and I was in Jacksonville area those years, my junior high years. And
did you come from a naval family, if I remember? Yes.
Oh my goodness, yeah, my dad's Navy. My Uncle Bud actually just passed. My dad's kid brother was the national security advisor under Reagan. And they were all Naval Academy. One of my granddads was Naval Academy. My great uncle, Naval Academy. My uncle, Naval Academy. My first cousin's Naval Academy. And my dad really expected me to go, and I just didn't. It was 69. It was a volatile time. Yeah. Guys I've been playing baseball with, if they didn't go to college, they went to Vietnam and came back and said it's crazy. And I just didn't feel like I was a soldier. And so I didn't go to the Naval Academy, and did go very briefly to college. And as soon as my lottery number, they were picking birthdays out of like Keno, and whoever went first went to Vietnam. And mine was a high number, and I just dropped out and eventually ended up in New York City back with my high school. My dad moved to New York when I was a sophomore in high school and was a test pilot for Grumman on Long Island. So I graduated from high school in the North Shore of Long Island and Locust Valley High. And so we moved in, some of my New York buddies, we moved into New York and started doing, open mic night at Gertie's Smoke City and down in the Village. And we lived in Hell's Kitchen, 51st between 9th and 10th, it's crazy.
Of course.
And as a band, we added a drummer and keyboard player and moved down to DC to play the clubs. Then we heard Boston was just a great place to play. We moved up there and kind of came unglued. And as I said, I ended up in some other bands, and that's when I met Dick Waterman. And
at Jack's.
At Jack's.
Yeah. When you were playing with Bonnie that whole time, I know you must have grown. I mean, you would have grown anyway, but we watched it. Those of us that really cared about you and loved your playing, but you grew exponentially. It was really fast.
Well,
and
thank you.
No, I really mean it. And then when you went to Muscle Shoals, how did that change everything?
Well,
musically? I know about your family, but
we're talking about, when you talk about growth, in Bonnie's band, I started at 22 and left her band at 27.
Yep.
And in the course of those years, I had gotten married. I had twin babies. We had twins. My kid brother was murdered in Boston, like brutally. And I went through, how are those changes not going to affect you? It's just powerful changes. And at the end, by the last tour, I was just sort of not a happy man. I was, not taking good care of myself mentally and becoming relatively toxic. And so, when I got off the road with her, the last gig I did with Bonnie was New Year's Eve, 1980. It was Delbert McClinton and Bonnie, and we were opening for Willie Nelson and Leon Russell. And
wow, that's loaded.
It was a great gig. I was called back out for the encore for Whiskey River, and I'm standing next to Earl Campbell and the Mayor. Anyway, that night, basically, I had a revelation that I couldn't live like that any longer. And so when I got home, about a week after I got home, I just called Bonnie's office and said, I think it'd be good to look for somebody else for the next tour. And there was no acrimony at all. Bonnie and I were wonderfully friends and peaceful about it. And she'd called me actually a few days later and said, we're going through changes and probably ought to look another. And I was like, I'm totally there, Bonnie. I'd called your office last week and told her, and she was, you beat me to it or whatever. But we're all good. It was all good. And about a month later, I met Jimmy Johnson from Muscle Shoals in a hotel in LA. I was introduced to him.
Oh, it was in LA. It was in LA.
Yeah. He was out there doing business of some kind. I don't know what it was, but we met and I played him a song and he said, well, play me something I don't like, and he said, I'd love to demo that tune. And so they flew me down here to Muscle Shoals and had Roger Hawkins and David Hood, Mac McAnally and Clayton Ivey and Randy McCormick, Duncan Cameron. It was a killer band. And we demoed my stuff and he pitched it to McGuinn Hillman, who was in there with Jerry Wexler at the time.
Yep.
And they did it. I got my first tune that I demoed cut there. And he said, we'd love to have you here. And I went back to LA and gave everybody notice. And half my LA friends were like, you're moving to Alabama, you nuts.
Yeah, well.
But I already, but I woke up every morning. There was a guy in my band named Paul Siegel who had a record collection, like thousands of vinyl. And he turned me onto the Meters and Booker T. And, he knocked me out of my pop sensibility. And I love country rock, I love polka and all that, but he turned me on to Merle. And so, we woke up to the Bealtitudes album with the Staple Singers, Respect Yourself, I'll Take You There. So we knew about Muscle Shoals. And when I met Jimmy, I was totally into it. And Janet and I moved here in 1980. And it probably saved my life. I mean, I could do an Etta James session and in 10 minutes be standing on third base coaching Little League. So I couldn't do that anymore.
That's really, really awesome. Do you think you could play me a few of the things that, I don't mean songs, but just parts of things that you've recorded in Muscle Shoals? A few licks or anything like that?
Well, I've sort of already showed you what I do for a lot of people. Like, it's funny. One of my favorite stories is my first time with Bobby Bland. We did a shuffle. We kicked off with a, like. We kicked it off like that. We kicked it off like that, but when we went, I went something like, and Bobby goes, take your time, son. And, and so when we went back the next time, I went, like, all right. Then I went, just 1/10 of what I played on my first lick, whatever. And it's even on the record. I don't even remember the name of the song, but somewhere in the middle of the record, they moved that little voice of him and I start this solo and I go, or whatever. And you hear him go, take your time, son. And I just love, the fact, you know. I mean, I love playing the guitar, you know, it's what I do. Whatever.
And Jamie,
Just,
one of your, what is Jamie, one of your sons is working there now, right?
Yes, my oldest son, one of the twins, is a wonderful bass player. As a matter of fact, he's playing a gig right now with a Grammy winner at some outdoor concert here in Alabama. And
Congratulations.
yeah, he's a wonderful player.
Yeah.
And then his twin sister sings, and my youngest son is a very musical kid. He plays great guitar. He's in a band, and he writes and sings and plays guitar. I had no moral high ground. It's like, stay in school. No, I mean, my dad would threaten to take my guitar away if I got a B in school, and I didn't pull that number on my kids, you know. So
right. Well, that's really far out. And just a couple of questions in terms of how you feel here in terms of where you are musically and where you are spiritually. How have you changed spiritually?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things. First of all,
Sure.
Spiritually, I absolutely believe there's a God.
Yep.
And I have been the beneficiary of his great mercy and grace many, many times.
Yep.
And I'm very thankful for that. And that's a big change from when I was young and reckless and, you know, and whatever.
Well, that probably saved you, man. I think
it saved my life. It saved my marriage.
Yeah.
You know, my kids can visit on Christmas and have a dad and a mom there, and I'm nobody's judge. It's a volatile time.
No, I understand.
But by golly, it held us together. And as far as, you know, emotionally, as I said, we learn over the years. I think when you're young, every crisis has equal impact or equal import. You know, everything's important. But when you age, you start to prioritize. You start to realize, you know what? I'm just not going to die on that hill over there. And you just sort of knock things off and you become less stressed. You know, you just, you pick your battles strategically and win them if you can, but you don't fight every battle anymore. You know, you don't have to be the best. You don't have to be, you know, things start happening to you physically. You know, in 2 weeks, I'll be 70 years old. And in my head, I'm not 70 years old, but in my body, it's starting to remind me that I just might be nearing that particular milestone. And so, you know, there are just certain things you just don't fight anymore. And I think it's wonderfully relaxing. I think living in the South too, the South has a tempo that's less stressful, that, you know, we're not having to get, you know, in LA, I had to go, okay, the gig is 12 miles away. Do I have to set aside 2 hours to get, you know, to get 12 miles? Down here, it takes 12 minutes.
Yep.
And so
sweet. I remember my mother was from Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I still have some remote relatives down there, but when we would go down there, I mean, even when I was out of college and we had a baby, I was taken aback by how slow, because I mean, we were, you know, we were really whatever, productive and, you know, high powered jobs. So sweet. You would walk down the street and people would like nod and say, how are you? And I remember the first 2 days I said to Denny, this is kind of weird. Like this, you know, or you'd go to a store and they would start really a conversation, like a nice long conversation, and I'd get antsy. Like I needed to like get going. And then by about a week and a half.
You didn't need to get going.
No, not at all. It was just like, wow, this is really nice. This is
when you know, I'm a Southern man. We're Texans, you know, my heritage. And I lived the first 14 years of my life in the South. And when I first moved to New York City, I just walked down the street, I'd smile at somebody, and I'd say, you know, and people looked at me like I was going to like rob them or something, you know, like, whoa, you know, and I had to learn myself, you know, not to violate people's space.
Well, I think it's great you moved down there. I'm visiting down there. I really, really want to see what it's like to live there. And
We'd love to have you.
do you have horses?
Come on.
I'm bringing my horse, who's not with me anymore. I couldn't afford to keep it, but I'm coming. I have a couple other really important questions. What other ways have you, I don't know if I want to use the word spiritually, but I want to use the word emotionally, grown?
Well, that's I take a little.
I know that's a very amorphic question. I know that.
Well, I think, as we've said, the older we get, you can't help but take a little inventory. I've been invited to over 20 funerals in the last few years. It's that season in our lives, and if you don't take a little inventory, you're missing the point. And nobody wants to show their emotions. Nobody wants to wear their emotions on their sleeve when you're young and strong, and but at this age, Janet thinks I'm becoming a sap. I cry at camera commercials, or the daughter going off to college and running back and hugging her dad kind of stuff. And I realized that if you don't look people in the eye, take that minute, not just know they're there, but actually bear witness to them being there. Wow. Look somebody in the eye and let them know that we're both here together now, and you don't understand that we're in the now. If you don't eat the heart out of it now, you're gonna get someplace down the road and go, why didn't I? And most people don't pass on worried about the things they did. They pass on worried about the things they didn't do.
Wow, Will.
That regret. I wish I'd told somebody I love them.
Love them.
I wish I had been more, and I don't want that. I want to live. I saw a marquee on a church once that said, live your life in such a way they won't have to lie at your funeral. and I mean, that's just sort of funny to me. I'd like to think that emotionally I'm a lot more in touch. I feel things more. A lot of times I think when you're young, music is more mathematical. Mm-hmm. And now it's much more of a feel thing. Like the notes are subjective, but the feel isn't.
That's perfectly said, because it really comes out. It's almost like not just your emotions, but your soul comes out in your playing. Well,
I hope so. I want to play honestly. I want to say this is all I know. I just did a guitar clinic, and I was sandwiched. I was out at the Tacoma Guitar Show last weekend, and I was sandwiched between Mark Lettieri, who's a monster. He's a snarky puppy, and then Andy Timmons, who they designed. Really? And they designed pedals for him. These are two really guitar gods, and I got up and I did sort of a like this is how I change chords, and they're going, whatever, and they were wonderful. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Mark did a couple of funk things that were just like, wow, but I'm saying they can get outside and just, they're monsters. And I'm not nearly that technical, but I like to think. I think that I touch the guitar sweetly,
It's tasty. Yep.
I think I touch it sweetly. I touch it more nicely than I did when I was younger.
No, that's good. That's like a great lesson to learn. And thank you. I'm gonna miss when you go off the computer. I really appreciate you coming today to do this. I can't tell you how much I do. I really.
Well, it was my pleasure, truly my pleasure. And I'm hoping you do end up in our neck of the woods, and we'll go out for a glass and we'll sit down and we'll speak in person.
Well, definitely.
For the first time in 47 years or something.
Isn't it crazy? Okay. Thank you, Will, again. You're just wonderful. You are. You've a lot of.
I appreciate you, so Betsy. It's very mutual.
Take care. Say hi to Janet and hug everybody.
I sure will. I will.
Okay. Bye, sweetie. Take care.